Second-class citizen. Who or what comes to your mind when you hear that term? Whether we're watching the news or listening to the gossip of strangers in the coffee shop, a second-class citizen is that person who isn't afforded the same dignity or respect as the rest of us. At the time of Jesus, this is how people would have viewed Mary Magdalene. As a follower of Jesus, Mary was not only a woman in a male-dominated world, but also someone with a past that should have squelched her hopes and her potential. But her story, in a way that only God can write, became one that was full of significance, love, and influence. You're invited into a moment of reset and discovery, because the events around the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus are the absolute answer to every longing heart. May God give us eyes to see.
Thought it was green. It's green. Okay, cool. You guys doing all right? We're going to be talking about Mary Magdalene here in just a minute. I want to start somewhere else, though. How many of you guys heard of Black Hawk Down? The movie, all that event in Mogadishu, the thing. I realized recently, just within past 2 weeks, that I have like 3 friends who were directly involved in that event, either just exactly before it or during it. And they don't know each other. Well, they might know each other, but I didn't meet them together. I met them each individually. And there's something interesting I found about it, was none of the 3, when I met them, said, "Hi, I was at Black Hawk Down in Mogadishu, that's me." None of them did that. Matter of fact, I don't know if any of them actually told me themselves that they were involved. All of them, you kind of had to pry the story out of all 3 of them. And they tell it, when you do get them to talk, they tell it like they were there. Have you ever noticed that? Somebody who was actually there says things differently than somebody who wasn't there. Like, there's 2 ways we go if we were there, and we're going to tell people that. The first way, not the most common way, is, "Yeah, I was there. Yeah, that was me right there." One of my friends actually had somebody who played him in the movie Black Hawk Down, seriously. And some people come out, now he doesn't, none of my friends come out this way. "Yeah, I was there." And then when they tell the story, they blow themselves up. They make themselves seem even bigger than they were when it happened. Now, the second way, people tend to go the other direction, right? They go the other extreme. And one of my friends, he was there in a major event just before the stuff that made the news. And his helicopter actually got shot down, and he fended off bad guys until they could rescue him and his co-pilot. And it's an incredible story. And the way he tells it, it's like, "Well, I got up, it was a Tuesday, I got up, had some eggs, got in the helicopter, flew around, got shot down, kept off some bad guys, hit McDonald's on the way home." It's like it's this nothing thing. And a lot of times you can tell if somebody is telling a story that's real. You can tell if they were there. Does that make sense? And today, I don't know, spoiler alert, we're talking about the resurrection of Jesus. And my favorite of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all are about Jesus and his life. And my favorite of the ones when it talks about the resurrection is John, because John, not only does he claim to be there, he sounds like he was there. He tells it like somebody who was not in the room, in the garden when it happened. I mean, he tells a story like at the beginning of John chapter 20 about he and Peter, and they find out from some women that the stone's away from the tomb, and they go running, and John's faster than Peter, so he beats Peter to the tomb, and then Peter, being really Peter, just barrels past him into the tomb, and they're both confused, and they go home. Okay, that's how he tells the story, and it's like, if I'd been there, that's probably how I would have told the story. It doesn't build himself up. He doesn't brag about it. It's very real. And then the next thing that happens is Mary Magdalene's story. John tells Mary Magdalene's story, and John wasn't there for her story. He just missed it. I mean, literally just missed it, but he wasn't there for her story. But her story, as she tells it through John, sounds real. Does that make sense? It sounds authentic. It sounds like she was there. If Get to, we'll just read it together, and you can tell me, and then we'll work our way through after we read it. But it just doesn't sound like real. Because Mary had come to the tomb, Mary Magdalene, with some other women to get Jesus' body ready for permanent burial. They found the stone rolled away. They went back, told Peter and John, sprint to the tomb, go home. Now Mary's still hanging around in that area. And Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. And they asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" Now, the last time an angel asked you a question, how did you respond? Okay. And she says, "They have taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they put him." That's a sign of somebody in shock. If you look throughout the Bible at people when angels show up, they don't go, "Have you seen my keys?" There's a whole, and her reference is someone who is massively in shock about the death of her friend, Jesus. She's totally in shock. She doesn't go, "There are angels here. There's something happening." She's just in shock. And when they said that, at this she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. And he asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" Another one. "Who is it you're looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener. Now, she's obviously confused. So was everybody else. Don't look down on her because she was confused. "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you've put him, and I'll go get him." And Jesus said to her, "Mary." He just called her name. And she turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. And then apparently she just ran over and grabbed him around the knees. That's the only way to picture this. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God." And Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them what he had said, told them that he had said these things to her. Now, anytime you're getting a story, it's always good to get some context on it. Like if we were talking about Black Hawk Down, and if you really want to understand the story, you're going, "Excuse me, were we at war?" No, we weren't. You're saying at least 2 helicopters got shot down in Mogadishu around the same basic time frame, and we weren't at war? No, we were not. There are details, right? You can look them up. I'm not going to tell you the details, but you can look them up of what in the world was going on, and there's a lot of background that you have to understand the story. Well, this story needs a big background because it's part of a big story. Does that make sense? And so what I want to do before we even dig in any deeper is I want to give you the big story. And the big story, I always tell it using 4 words. And the 4 words are creation, fall, redemption, restoration. And it starts with a base concept. God created the universe. Okay? That's the base concept. Now, just so you know, Christians love to fight about what the creation looked like and when it happened and how long it took and what was the mechanism. None of that really matters. The important thing is God created the universe. And it says when he was done with the creation, he looked at it and said, "It's very, very good." And as part of that creation, he created us, human beings. And when he said very, very good, he was looking at us because we are able to do wonderful things. I'm not kidding. We do some really good stuff. Humans are capable of really, really good stuff. We're also capable of really, really bad stuff, right? And that's because of the next piece. There's creation, it's followed by fall. Fall is when we rebelled against God. You've heard the Garden of Eden story, all that stuff. Humans rebelled against God, and it created what we call a fallen universe, a universe where bad stuff happens, where people do bad things, where bad things just bad stuff all the time. So there's creation and there's fall. And thankfully, after the fall, after humans rebelled against God, God wasn't happy with that. God's very persistent. Being God, he tends to get what he wants. So he immediately sets about the process of restoring humanity to himself. And that's where we get to redemption. Now, when did redemption actually happen? At the cross. Jesus dies for our sins to redeem us so we can have a relationship with Christ, so we can be reconciled to God. And then, with Jesus, God begins a process of restoration where he's going to restore the universe back to being very, very good. Does that make sense? That's the big story. And Mary, and none of the other people involved, understood the big story at that point. They didn't know what was going on. So now let's walk through the story. I'm a pastor, so I have to have 3 points. It's a rule. Okay? So we're going to learn three things out of Mary's encounter with Jesus. And so let's go back and look at it again. It says, this first part, it says, Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw the two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head, the other at the foot. And they asked her, "Why are you crying? Why are you crying?" And she replies, "They've taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they put him." Now, here's something interesting. When you see angels in the Bible, they're not super common. It's not like angels just showed up every couple chapters there's an angel. But angels show up occasionally, enough that we can see patterns and learn a few things about them. And one of the things we learned, N.T. Wright pointed out, that when people in the Bible are afraid and angels show up, they tend to tell them not to be afraid. If you're afraid, God's told you to do something, you know you're supposed to be doing it, and you're scared to do it, and you show up, an angel's going to say, "Hey, time to put on the big boy pants and get to work." That's the angel's speech. If you're scared, get over it. Angels are not always all that friendly. But when angels show up and people are crying, and there are tears, the angel says, "Why?" I think that's kind of cool. Matter of fact, we, as we'll see in a little bit, Jesus is going to ask her the same question we saw earlier. Why are you crying? It reminds me just few chapters earlier, there was a guy named Lazarus, and Lazarus is dead, and he's about to get resurrected, and it's going to be really cool, and Jesus shows up, and another woman named Mary is crying. Do you maybe remember, any Bible geeks, remember what Jesus did in response to Mary's crying about the death of her brother Lazarus? He cried. Jesus wept. So, Mary is crying, and God's asking why. Not judgingly, just why. Can I make a point that some of you need to hear? God understands pain. He doesn't diminish it. He doesn't say it should go away. He doesn't say ignore your pain. Don't pretend that it's real. A lot of times when people are talking about religion, especially Christianity, they say, well, if you just become a Christian, all the pain just goes away. I've been a Christian a long time. That is not true. I mean, I hate to break this to you, but in a very real sense, because we live in a fallen universe and we're all fallen creatures, it is a true statement. Life sucks and then you die. There is a lot. I mean, and becoming a Christian doesn't take away the pain. The pain doesn't just go away because you're a Christian. You may be better able to deal with the pain, but I mean, if you got two people, and one's a Christian and one's not a Christian, and their mom dies, the Christian doesn't get less pain out of it than the non-Christian. Okay? We hurt just the same. So why was Mary crying? That might be a valuable question to ask. One thing, she was crying because she missed Jesus. See, Mary had a rough life. She was probably wealthy because she supported Jesus in his ministry, but, well, I mean, she had one of those. Anybody here got a story? You know, I got one of those boring stories. I know, raised in a nice house and grew up and did well in school, and I have one of those stories that nobody wants to hear. But some of you have stories that everybody wants to hear, but you don't ever want to tell. I'm saying? And Mary had that kind of story. There was a lot of pain in Mary's life up to this point. And she missed Jesus because Jesus stepped into the pain with her. Jesus helped her. He was there. So personally, she missed him as a friend. But Mary was also crying because when he died, she lost something. I don't know that she could have put her finger on what it was, but something was gone. Because with Jesus, I know the word I would use. I would use the word hope. There was hope, not just for her, hope for her community, hope for her nation, hope for her entire world. There was hope because Jesus had this vision and this plan and this power, and his teaching was amazing, and it went beyond anything she'd ever heard. And suddenly in her life, which started out with absolutely no hope, suddenly there was hope, and she had all this hope. She thought, he might even be Messiah. Matter of fact, by this point, she was pretty sure Messiah. And Messiah was going to come, and he was going to restore everything, and everything was going to be amazing. He was going to throw out the Romans and make the world better. And there was only one major, there were a few, but one of the major requirements for being Messiah was not dead. Of all the things Messiah had to be, not dead was way up on that list. Because you really needed, a living person to pull this off. So when Jesus died, she basically had put her money on him as Messiah, and she realized she'd lost her money. Because dead Messiah doesn't work. And all the hope that she had created and bore within herself was now gone. And so she's crying for that. And the pain is intense, and I need to tell you this today. Pain is real. I'm not going to get up here and tell you that if you just do everything right, your pain's going to go away. I'm not going to tell you that if you follow Jesus and with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, that you will have no pain. You will still have pain because, remember our diagram, creation, fall. You still live in a fallen world. You're still a fallen creature, and you are surrounded by other fallen creatures who are selfish jerks sometimes. And you know what? Sometimes the selfish jerk is you. And you cause pain, and you get pain, and pain is all around you, and it's real. But the resurrection tells us that pain is real, but it is also temporary. Because if we draw the line out with the fallenness of the universe, there's a point in that it stops. As God restores the creation back to very good, a very good universe is not one that's like crawling with pain. So there will come a point when the pain stops. In Revelation 7, it says God will wipe every tear from their eyes. And there's two really important lessons in this one really short verse. The one you see first, God's going to wipe all the tears away. The one you might see second is the tears are real. And the pain is real. So we live in a fallen world, and we are fallen creatures, and pain is real. And I'm not going to tell you that it's not, but I'm going to tell you that it's temporary. And Mary learned that firsthand, right? We read the story. Because she's in insane pain. We'll talk more about how much pain she was in. And the pain went like that away when Jesus called her name. And all the pain is temporary, okay? Now, there was one other reason that she was crying, in my opinion. I haven't asked her yet. She was crying because she didn't understand what was really going on. She didn't know the creation, fall, redemption, restoration story. She didn't know that Jesus had already finished the work of restoring humanity to himself, or that he was starting the work. She didn't know. Remember, and so when she turns around and saw Jesus standing there, and she didn't realize it was Jesus, listen to this pain. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you're crying for?" And thinking he was the gardener because she's confused, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go get him." Now, why is she saying this? Okay, because she knew crucifixion. She knew what crucifixion was. Crucifixion was the most humiliating way possible and the most painful way they could come up with to murder people who were going against the culture. And you know what they normally did with a person who was crucified? They had a standard operating procedure for crucified people. They threw their bodies in the dump. Was a dump? You've heard of Gehenna, maybe? They just took the bodies over to Gehenna and threw them in the dump where they would be burned up, and I hate to bring this up, and eaten by carrion. And here's what I think Mary is thinking. Jesus wasn't supposed to be placed in a rich man's tomb. See, he was... Remember, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a rich man, took the body of Jesus and put it in the tomb. But it wasn't supposed to be there. And this is probably the wrong picture, but I'm thinking that maybe the head of the HOA for the cemetery got wind of the fact there was a crucified person in the cemetery, and as any head of an HOA will do, immediately went to work to get the body out. It's my theory. But where does Mary think the body is? Not in another tomb. She doesn't think this guy, the gardener, she doesn't think they took the body out and just moved it to a nicer tomb or a lesser tomb. She thinks they took it and threw it in the dump. And listen to this. She's asking this man, "Where's the body? Because I want to find it, and if I can, to save it. And if I can't, to anoint it and cry over it. That's what she's looking for. That's all she's looking for. She's not looking for Jesus. She's just looking for his body. And she is a crushed, shock-ridden individual until she is as low as a human can go, and Jesus said to her, Mary. And she turned to him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. And it's interesting that it says it's in Aramaic. Aramaic was the language everybody spoke in that region. I was in Iceland last year, and in Iceland, you may know what the national language of Iceland is? Icelandic. They didn't go crazy naming it. It's Icelandic. They speak Icelandic. And it's a really complicated, weird language. But all the people know it because they're Icelanders, so they know the language. But a significant percentage, a very high percentage of the people there speak English, because there was an English and then an American military base in Iceland up until not that long ago. A lot of the trade goes through them is English, and so you can do really well in Iceland speaking English. You never go into a store and the clerk doesn't speak English. It's just very common. And in their day, it was very, very similar. The people in their homes spoke Aramaic, just like the people in Iceland speak Icelandic in their home. When they went out in public, they spoke Greek, because that was the language of the entire world that they knew. So when the Gospels are written, they're written in Greek because they don't want to write them in just this little tiny area. They write them in Greek. But most of the stuff that happened in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, happened in Aramaic and then got translated into Greek. Does that make sense? But this case, and just a handful of other cases, John, who wrote the Gospel of John, decided to tell you what the Aramaic word was for what she said. And all the Bible geeks are going, yeah. We're about to get some deep stuff here. This is going to be one of those words that's got so much meaning and so much depth and so much. No, it's not. If I were to give you a multiple choice quiz and tell you it is not a trick question up front, not a trick question, and I say the word rabboni, it either means master, leader, or rabbi, what are you going to guess? It's in there. There's two extra letters, O-N, but it says rabbi, which means teach. John put an Aramaic word. Go to all this trouble to put in an Aramaic word, which doesn't really mean much special. You guys know what a rabbi is. Why'd he do it? I have a theory. I think I'm right. Because you'll see this once in a while in the New Testament, where there's a word, and I said it in Aramaic. On the cross, Jesus says it puts it in Aramaic. Because how did John find out about this event? Mary told him. That's what God, that's pretty much what Jesus told Mary, go tell everybody what just happened, right? So she is the one who told him. And I'm guessing, do you think she just told him once? Started, and she would tell him the story. And she would get to the point when Jesus calls her name. Mary. The sweetest thing she's ever heard in her life was when what she thought was the gardener called her Mary. And then out of her heart comes a word. It means master, it means teacher, it means leader, it means friend for her. It is the word she called him. You have people in your life that you have a nickname for. It may not be a common nickname, it may be just a normal nickname, but that nickname is the person. My grandchildren call me Papa, okay? And I hope as they grow up, that name has significance and meaning, and when they hear the word Papa, they have all these positive reactions to that name. And let me tell you a secret. They will have nothing what Mary got for the word Rabboni. Because it meant everything to her. And every time she told the story, she just told it with passion. And she got to that point, and I'm betting you she cried. Can't read it without crying, so I'm pretty sure she cried. Okay? And then she just said it with such passion and such emotion. John told the story. He couldn't hear it in Greek. He only heard it in Aramaic. He only heard it in the word that she used with so much passion and so much reality and so much honesty and so much pain and so much healing and all the stuff that flowed into that word. And that's the only way he could tell the story was by using the word Rabboni, and so he did. And that's really important for us. For some of us especially, because some of you think Christianity is about following a bunch of rules. You think Christianity is about a lifestyle. Or it's about a ritual. It's about showing up at church frequently. You think Christianity is this thing about stuff. But you know what Christianity was for Mary? Rabboni. Master, teacher, leader. The one who just called my name. Now, we said that she was missing something. She didn't know it was the hope that Jesus brought. Some of you are missing something. For some of you, it's surrounded by pain, like it was with Mary. It's encapsulated by pain. For some of you, it's not, but there's just something missing. And you can't necessarily put your finger on what it is. And you've tried a lot of things to fix it, to fill it. Oh, you tried success, you've tried, name it. Pleasure, you've tried, whatever. You've tried to fill it with so many things, and you're looking, and you don't know for what. Sort of like Mary, with or without that much pain. Well, what happened to Mary? Jesus called her name. And I need to tell you, Christianity is not about you following a ritual or a religion, or Christianity is reconciliation to God, and that reconciliation, it is personal. Some of you think you're supposed to be pursuing, and there's a good thing to that, but you know who's pursuing more? God is pursuing you more than you're pursuing him. See, Mary wasn't looking for Jesus, was she? She was looking for a dead body right up until Jesus said her name, right? Till he called her name. And I'm praying for here and online that at some point in the not too distant future you hear God call your name. I don't mean audibly like, oh. Jesus said, no one comes to me unless the Father draws them. And I'm praying you hear the name, your name. Not just anybody's name, not broad. Do you know how much, this is crazy to me, because God was after Mary in the most loving way possible. God was pursuing Mary. Jesus was pursuing Mary. Do you ever think about this piece of the puzzle here? What did Jesus say to Peter and John in the garden? Nada. He skipped them. Jesus was only in the garden for one person. Isn't that crazy? Peter and John are going to be like the two biggest guys in the new church that he's about to start. They're the big dudes, and Jesus skips them so he can get to Mary. He was only in the garden for Mary, and once he dealt with Mary, he left the garden. Did you know God's after you that way? Not the way he's after me, not the way he's after the person sitting next to you, not the way your mom, your dad, anybody. He's only after you your way. He knows how to call your name special. And when he does, you're the only one who's going to hear it. Because it's real and it's personal. And by the way, if you're feeling kind of dry, if you're a Christian and it's getting a little dry. Is that my granddaughter? Could be. I got a grand over there. No. If you're dry and you're thinking, I need to work on my Christianity harder, you don't. You need a discipline too. You need to do that. What are 21 days of prayer? And we'll talk about how to pray and everything else. But the reality is God wants relationship with you much more than you want a relationship with him. God is always pursuing you. Always. Your job's not to run. Okay? Just don't run away. And God's there for you. Okay? Okay, one more thing. We'll go get our ham. The last thing happens. Jesus says to her, do not hold on to me. And like I said, the only way this makes any sense to me is if as soon as he called her name, she went and grabbed him around the knees. Just like grabbed him. She could have just hugged him, but I have a picture of her going into the knees. I don't know. For I have not yet ascended to the Father, so don't grab me. Instead, go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and my God and your God. And Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with this news. I have seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her. Now, let's go back to our creation, fall, redemption, restoration story. Creation still in effect. Fall still living in it, but the redemption has happened. The cross has happened. Up to this moment, what has Jesus done about restoration? What has Jesus done as far as restoring the universe? Nothing. Not saying he's nothing wrong with that, but he hasn't got. That's not the step he's at yet. Where God restores people to himself and restores the universe, it's very good at that. He has done nothing in that area, and that's perfect. Like I said, that's perfectly fine. That's an acceptable thing. That's where he's at in the process. He doesn't do anything. What's the first thing he does to restore the universe? He does it with one word: Mary. When he calls Mary, step one, he restores her to a relationship with him. And step two, he sends her out to be the restoration and start the process of restoration for everybody else. That's when restoration started. God's plan for all eternity, creation, fall, redemption, restoration. The restoration starts when Jesus looks at Mary and calls her by name. Isn't that cool? I think it's cool. I don't know. You might not like it. Okay? And let me ask you a question. How do you think she went to tell everybody else? Do you think maybe she stopped for coffee on the way? You think she left the garden and went, these shoes are, I'm going to stop by the house and get another pair of shoes. Do you think she sauntered, meandered? What do you think she did? She ran as fast as her little feet would carry her. Because what she had was important. It was urgent. It was the most important thing these people had ever heard, and she had the message, and she had to get it to them. So I think we're all safe in assuming that she ran. Because suddenly, she went from being hopeless to having hope, and from just having hope to having purpose. And when we understand that God's restoration, that God is restoring himself and inviting us to be part of it, that restoration gives us purpose, it gives us urgency. It gives us urgency. Because what we do matters. A word I love, in John chapter 10, verse 10, Jesus said, I have come they may have life and have it to the full. And what we call that is flourishing. Did you know that's what God wants for you? You to flourish. God wants the fullness of life for you. And that fullness of life, as he intends it, not around all the things that you have centered your life on that have failed, success and pleasure and grabbing stuff and all the things that you do to try to find purpose in life. It centers on being part of God's work of restoring everything to himself. And that's a very personal thing. God has a way that he wants you to work. When he calls your name, he's calling you to a special calling to restore creation. Okay? And we, as his church, that's what we're called to. That's what we get to do. We get to the two big things we do. One is we're the ones who get the message. It's like Mary. Mary, go tell them, because this is really cool. Mary runs, tells Peter and all the rest of them. And then eventually they tell the next group, who tells 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 the next group, who told somebody who told me. And somebody who told you. And if you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, then I get to be the one today to tell you. Okay? Because it says in 2 Corinthians, all this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Jesus Christ, and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. We get the privilege. I say kind of famous for that. Because I know this. But see, I love Easter. I just love Easter. I get excited. You can tell my family, they'll tell you that I get excited about Easter. I have to tell it. I have to watch all week. I have to put a break on and not pay attention too much because I'll get too excited about Easter. Because I get excited because number one, the fact that Jesus rose from the dead changed absolutely everything. Paul says somewhere else that if Jesus hasn't risen, we're of all people most miserable because we wasted our lives. But the other thing I like about Easter is those of you who are here. I know there's a lot of you who are followers of Christ, but I know there's a lot of you who probably aren't. And I'm okay with that. Okay? I'm okay with the fact that some of you are here because you're going to talk to mom on the phone today. And if you say you didn't go to church, she'll be disappointed. And so you came to church so that mom and you will have a better phone call today. Okay with that. Some of you are here because your spouse or your significant other has been trying to get you to come to church with them, and you've been saying no for a long time. Said, I'll go at Easter. I'm okay with that. Because it means I get to tell you. Some of you have been Christ followers for a while, but have drifted away from him. You came back at Easter. But that's all you're planning, is just to come back at Easter. And I get a chance to remind you of the joy we get from Jesus and the meaning and the urgency and the power that comes with that. I get to tell you that. And I love Easter, okay? Because one of the things we focus on as a church is reaching the lost. The people who've won. Lost isn't a mean thing. It just means you're not in the right place. And there's plenty of people here and online, and you know, right? Not in the right place. You haven't been in the right place in your spiritual walk for a while now, forever. And so I get to tell you how to get unlost, how to follow the Rabboni, the rabbi. I also like it because we get to be part of that restoration. That restoration isn't just about telling people to have a relationship with Jesus. It's also about helping the people who are hurting. Because some people are hurting in such a way they can't hear about Jesus until we help them. If you're hungry, it's hard to hear about Jesus. It's hard to worry about your spiritual stuff when your physical stuff's a mess. Jesus told him in Matthew, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. So we try to reach the lost and we try to help the least. We get that privilege of being the people who help the least. And the other thing I get excited about at our church is we go all out to help the least. We'll do fundraisers. We'll do drives. We'll provide food for people. We help people with food here. We do it around the world. And I get excited because we do it, and this church does it so well. It's funny. I'll tell you the story because I want to. During COVID, I was sure we weren't be able to keep up helping people. I was sure that with all that was going on, there was no way we could really do a good job supporting the ministries that are used to us supporting them. And then we had a drive to help out the 5 and 2 food pantry, which is just a local thing. And we raised so much money, and we brought in so much food that the people there were like, what in the world just happened? And I didn't say this at the time, but I would if I got another chance. Our church is about restoring God's creation, and we take it seriously. Because we have an urgency and we have a purpose, and it's very real. And also, God is working in us. Here's how Paul put it in Corinthians. He said, therefore, if in Christ, the new creation has come. If you're in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone. The new is here.